If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you'll know that I love making fun of incompetent political communication strategies. And today, the Liberal Party has given us a gift with this very astroturfed propaganda video that looks quite expensive, trying to attack Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre on the issue of housing. And I think it falls completely flat on its face. I don't think this would convince anybody to vote for the Liberal Party, let alone dislike Pierre Poilievre. It's basically just a bunch of naysaying, pretending like it's exposing Pierre Poilievre for, I guess, not being in favor of socialism. But I'll get into the video shortly. I just quickly want to mention the fact that we have a Give, Send, Go link in the description of this video. We're being sued by a ridiculous billionaire developer for defamation. He has no evidence we defamed him. We simply noted the fact that he was maxing out donations to Aaron O'Toole in 2020 during the leadership race, and then we just showed a bunch of Globe and Mail reporting about this guy, and supposedly that's enough for him to try and sue us for $900,000 or $600,000. I've lost count, but it's cost us $26,000 fighting him. So if you want to contribute, there's a Give, Send, Go link in the description below. Really helps us out. And anyways, onto the video.
Pierre Poilievre pretends to care about helping you find a home. The truth is, he doesn't. Listen to the way he talks about starter homes for young people in this country.
A tiny little shack.
The woman who lives there defended her house.
He called it a shack. A shack. That was a little embarrassing also, because it's not.
Can I just note quickly here that you usually should start your argument off with your best point. And considering that this was apparently their best point, that Pierre Poilievre called a shack-sized house a shack, is somehow going to make you dislike Pierre Poilievre. Have you seen that house? It was on the market for like $570,000, and it's probably smaller than most apartments are. It's like a tiny little box. Cute house. I'd live in it. I would like to own a house like that because I can't afford any home because everything's too expensive. But you started off with that point. Pierre Poilievre once called a tiny house a shack. Okay, what's your point?
And here's his perspective on affordable housing.
They don't want nationalized government-controlled homes, Mr. Speaker. We don't need a Soviet-style takeover of housing.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Nobody wants socialized housing. It's a terrible plan. It actually usually shrinks the supply of housing because every time the government starts taxing people to try and build homes, the buildings come up slowly. It ends up causing all other houses to go up in price, and other rent control schemes end up just causing everything to be either you're one of the lucky 10% of people in an area who has the rent controlled house, or you're paying much higher rents or higher prices for homes because you weren't one of the lucky people to get the subsidized home. So your house price or your rent cost is now subsidizing that other person's lower cost. I also don't really get this whole graphic thing they're doing with Pierre Poilievre's head being taken apart by a construction crew. It just seems odd.
Interesting, because as Pierre reminds us constantly, he actually was the housing minister.
When I was housing minister, let's talk about when I was housing minister.
The fact is, he wasn't very good at it, and I'm not even sure he cared. He only mentioned the word housing once in the House of Commons, and Canada built fewer homes that year than in any year since we formed government.
Okay, but it depends on what the immigration rate is. The immigration rate in 2015 was far lower than it is this year in 2024 or the last few years. We've been bringing in 500,000 people in per year, plus temporary foreign workers, plus students. It's like about 1 million a year. Some of those, again, are temporary. But that, the thing is that we didn't need to build as many houses back in 2015. And noting that Pierre Poilievre only mentioned housing once in the House of Commons. Okay, well, he wasn't exactly the housing minister for very long, and we actually had far lower housing prices. So again, what's your actual point? This is such manipulated metrics to pretend that Pierre Poilievre was not good as the housing minister.
And that's the total number of homes that were built across the...
And even note that this chart is actually showing that the housing starts are falling since 2021. They shot up artificially because we didn't build that much during 2020 because of the pandemic. It's a little bit higher than 2019, but it really just shows how low 2019 was. But despite the fact, again, we have 500,000 to 1 million people in terms of total number of foreigners coming into the country. And we are only building a little bit more than we used to build in 2015 when the immigration rate was like sub 300,000, sub 250,000.
The entire economy. But when you actually look at what the government got done when Pierre was housing minister, his record's even worse.
I like that the government didn't get a lot done when he was housing minister. I don't want socialized housing. I do not want socialist housing. That, again, usually is just billing taxpayers to build very few homes for the amount of money being expensed. It always happens that way. You'll see ridiculous reports where they built like 2 apartment buildings that can hold 100 people, and they ended up spending like $60 million.
They supported exactly 0 new apartments across Canada while
Good.
he was minister. They withdrew from cooperative housing and supported none. And when it comes to affordable,
And yet housing was cheaper back then. Wow, housing was cheaper back in 2015, and the government was less involved in the housing industry. I think that the government could have gotten even less involved in the housing industry back in 2015 than they were. And even then, I think they could have probably lowered immigration a little bit because we did have housing prices starting to rise. But the rise during Harper compared to the rise during Trudeau is immensely different. I think since Trudeau took over in 9 years, housing prices have gone up by like 40%.
housing, Pierre was responsible for a grand total of 6 affordable units across the entire country. Now, these stats aren't a coincidence. They're a direct consequence of decisions that Pierre and his government made to make massive cuts to home building. And now he's promising to make those cuts again. In fact, Pierre
I always like whenever we talk about cuts, like we're cutting home building as if, again, it's even the government's responsibility to build homes for people. It's not. Yes, we can feel all warm and fuzzy that we built someone a home, but you built someone a home for usually 5 times the cost. Way more bureaucrats got involved, and you're basically just using this one person's poverty issues as a reason for the government to take over the housing industry. One person getting a home does not mean that we should then tax to death, thousands of other people. That's effectively what's happening. Every time the government under Trudeau has spent more for more housing, they are putting more businesses under, they're putting more taxpayers into bankruptcy by taxing them too much in order so they can build very limited housing in which doesn't even keep up with the amount of poor people they're generating through their terrible policies.
has gone so far as to say that governments should get out of the business of home building altogether.
Yeah, they're bad at it.
And there's some weird stuff in this plan that just doesn't make sense.
There's some weird stuff in this plan. Dude, it's kind of weird how much you've been investing into housing, and housing starts have been going down over the past 3 years.
He wants to create a super bonus that only applies to a few select cities across Canada and has very little money in it. Certainly not enough to make.
Yes, if you look at those cities are the biggest cities in Canada. You don't exactly need to give people super bonuses for building like a home in like Blackie, Alberta, or High Level, because housing prices have not skyrocketed there because they have not experienced the crazy amount of concentrated immigration.
Make a difference. He's proposing to create an entire bureaucracy just to service a snitch line so people can rat out their neighbors if they disagree with their housing policies.
No. This is Pierre Poilievre rightfully opposing mass rezoning, so that if you purchased a home in a single detached family, like a family housing unit area, that you're not going to have massive apartment buildings being put up right next to you. It was kind of part of the deal of you buying a house there in the first place, that you wanted a single family detached home and you didn't want a massive apartment building right next to you. The thing is that now you have liberals coming out and saying, you don't want just random houses, random apartments going up all over your neighborhood. Oh, what a NIMBY. What a NIMBY. No. I want property taxes to go down. I want the amount of inspections that houses have to go through while they're being built to go down, because it's just ridiculous and bloated these days how much you have to have inspected over and over and over again just to put up a single house. I actually want things that will get houses built faster, as well as protecting the nature of people's neighborhoods.
Put billions of dollars on the table to support the construction of hundreds of thousands of affordable housing units for low-income families across the country.
Okay, you can put all these points on the chart, but that does not mean that houses have been built. Again, here's where I'm confused why the Liberals are even talking about this issue. I want to quickly show it on screen. This is the worst issue for the Liberals. I think it's this one. No, it's this one. Right now, 57% of people are pessimistic that they're even going to be able to buy a house. Only 19% of people are actually somewhat or very optimistic that they're going to be able to purchase a home in their lifetime if they're a first-time home buyer. The people have not been made more optimistic by the Liberals basically shilling money out to different parts of Canada, different major cities and other communities to build homes in their bloated housing markets where everything costs too much to build. And that's why the Liberals are just throwing money at the issues, which will cause more inflation, which will make home housing prices go up. It's stupid.
And he promises to take that away. We've put new incentives in place to reduce taxes on home builders by removing the GST on the construction of new apartments. Pierre wants to put those taxes.
And all these tax breaks, though, come with more government requirements. They never mention the fact that you're going to have to go through more environmental inspections, that you're going to have to do things their way, that you're going to have a certain amount of rent-controlled units to get that 5% tax reduction. So at the end of the day, it's not worth it because the government's going to saddle you with even more requirements.
Taxes back on for hundreds of thousands of middle-class homes across this country. He plans to do away with the fund that has already landed dozens of agreements with cities in every region of the country.
Yes, because those agreements come with requirements to remove all zoning across the city so that you can have buildings like apartments being put up right next to single-family homes. That's why Poilievre wants property taxes to go down, wants other building requirements to go down so that houses can go up faster. Again, despite the acceleration fund and other past liberal housing policies, prices have only gone up and housing starts have been going down over the past few years.
Official, the city of Halifax and the federal government have struck a deal to fast-track housing in the capital.
Wow, did it actually get fast-tracked?
Vaughan,
London, Ontario, Edmonton, Toronto,
Calgary, Vancouver,
and the city of Winnipeg.
what's more alarming than what
Just naming all these cities where housing is terrible, even after the Liberals passed these new policies. And again, they've been pushing, like, everyone's acting like, well, you can't criticize the Liberals' housing plan. They've only started this new plan over the last year. What, were they just too incompetent to get the problem solved over the past 8 years previously? No, this is just a rebranded version of what they were doing before, throwing money at cities, but now they're just throwing other requirements on cities in order to get the money.
is in his plan is what's missing. There's no mention of students, no mention of seniors, no mention of workers, no mention of the most vulnerable, and not a single measure designed to help you own a home. Pierre's plan isn't going to solve the housing crisis.
The thing is that the government can put whatever they want in plans. Execution is what matters. Actually cutting government spending, taxes, and a lot of other just government measures is going to make houses far cheaper. Cutting immigration is going to make housing far cheaper. And at no point are you ever going to say, we're going to help the vulnerable. Yet you help the vulnerable more because you don't just simply focus on the intentions of the plan. You focus on getting results. And oftentimes results don't mean just giving people cash because I support vulnerable Canadians, so I'm just giving them a bunch of money even though that's inflating the housing market.
Because Pierre doesn't care about the people that it impacts most. Pierre doesn't care about your community.
Sean Fraser, you are the immigration minister and you were literally told by your own staff that your immigration policies were driving up the cost of housing and you didn't care, yet I'm supposed to now be all offended at Pierre Poilievre because he didn't care about you when he was a housing minister. He's not going to care about you now. You didn't give a crap a few years ago when you were immigration minister and approving hundreds of thousands more people to enter the country into a housing market that didn't have enough space.
Pierre doesn't care about building more homes. The thing that Pierre cares about most
When I'm prime minister,
is Pierre.
Sorry, in what world is Pierre Poilievre not able to say when I'm prime minister? Obviously, he's going to say those words referencing what he's going to do when he's prime minister. Regardless, terrible video. You guys can leave your impressions in the comments. I do read the vast majority of comments that people leave, but like, man, do you think anyone watching that video is going to start voting liberal because of that? Because yes, if someone just devoids themselves from all context, they could see like, oh, Pierre Poilievre seems like a bad guy. But in the context of living in this country, is anyone going to think, well, wait, the liberals are actually good on housing? You know, housing keeps going up in my city. Rent keeps going up. You know, there's fewer homes year over year compared to the amount of people in the country. But you know what? Actually, the liberals are quite good. Nobody with any context for what's been going on in Canada is going to look at that and say, wait, Sean Fraser is actually good at his job. Nobody cares because the thing is that people actually see the results and they're living with the results. So they're not going to be mad with Pierre Poilievre wanting to do something different from what the government's currently doing. The government's current plan, and they're actually trying to pass a new housing plan or push forward a new housing plan because this housing acceleration fund has so obviously failed. They're going to be ditching it quite soon, that they want anything that's different from what the liberals are doing. Pierre's offering that, and that's why he's popular. Anyways, quickly just plugging the fact that I'm running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. Again, my name is Wyatt Claypool. This is what the riding looks like. It's on the west side of Calgary. If you live in this riding and you want a real conservative representing you, just buy a Conservative Party membership and check out my website in the description below, WyattClaypool.com. And if you know anyone in the city of Calgary, see if they live in this riding, see if they live in these new riding boundaries that will be coming down in April, and make sure they buy a membership. Anyways, that should be it for me today. I'll be back making fun of more liberal stuff later.